how are you? Did you enjoy your week? I hope you did. We have a couple of days that were pretty hot, right? I'm so glad that it has cooled down. Tonight, before we start the Vesper, I would like to pray for each one of us. I pray that the good Lord would bless each one of us with his bountiful love and to continue to protect us and our family. And may he also help each one of us to become his obedient children in following his will and learning to trust in him completely. Now let's move on to Numbers chapter 9. Imagine someone setting a reminder every year for a special day. Not just any day, but the day their life changed forever. It's sort of like a soldier who was rescued from the front lines on April 14th. Every year on that exact date, he lights a candle, tells the story, and thanks the one who saved him. Not a day early and not a day late, because the dates matter when they mark deliverance. That is what God asked the Israelites in Numbers chapter 9. 1 year after they escaped from Egypt, God said, "It is time to celebrate the Passover on the 14th day of the first month, just like I told you." Even though they were in the wilderness, far from the land of promise, God wanted them to pause and remember. He said, "You are a delivered people. Don't forget the day. Celebrate it just as I commanded." They were not just keeping a tradition. They were keeping faith alive by remembering their rescue on the exact day God saved them. Let me read to you the verses. Numbers chapter 9, verses 1 to 5. The Lord spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they came out of Egypt. He said, "Have the Israelites celebrate the Passover at the appointed time. Celebrate it at the appointed time at twilight on the 14th day of this month, in accordance with all its rules and regulations." So Moses told the Israelites to celebrate the Passover, and they did so in the desert of Sinai at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. The Israelites did everything just as the Lord commanded Moses. When the instruction was given, they were still in Sinai desert and was about to move on. Verses 1 to 5 were instruction from God to celebrate Passover at the precise day, 14th day of the month, the first month, and precise time at twilight. Moreover, they were to celebrate Passover according to the instruction given previously. We, modern day people, celebrate birthdays too and holidays. Sometimes people ask, why bother to remember these days? Some things that taking time off from work is a waste of time, and they'd be better, more productive if they are at work. But do you know that these holidays and observance serve deep psychological, social, and cultural functions? And God, being the creator of man, knows what is important for his creatures. The Passover in the days of Moses wasn't just a one-time event. It was established by God as a foundational remembrance day for Israel. Here's how it benefits the people psychologically, socially, and spiritually. Passover is to commemorate God's deliverance, as it mentioned back in Exodus chapter 12. And when your children ask you, "What does this ceremony mean to you?" then tell them, "It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. So the purpose is to remember the night God spared Israelites, firstborn, and God delivered them from the slavery in Egypt. So what's the spiritual benefit for them? Do you remember how the Israelites complained of thirst and hunger just a few days after the miraculous Red Sea crossing? They told Moses that they'd rather die in Egypt than die in the wilderness. How fast they forget, right? So in celebrating the Passover, the Israelites would learn to build gratitude in their hearts and remember that they have an almighty God, and it was his power that saved them and provided for them. Gratitude is important because human beings tend to think of the negatives and complain, and they easily forget the blessings that they have been receiving all this time. Also, the purpose of remembering the Passover is to teach the future generation. Let's look at Exodus 13, verses 8 to 9. On that day, tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. So, it functions like our modern day birthdays or holidays. It's a teaching tool. It connects young Israelites to their identity and heritage. It teaches them who they are and where they come from. It also reminds the younger generation about the stories of blessings from God. It will establish their faith and strengthen their trust in God when they themselves had to encounter life's challenges. So the function of the Passover also established their national identity. Let me read to you this verse from Exodus 12:14. This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generation to come you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. God designed Passover to unite the people around a shared history. A shared history strengthens relationships, fosters a sense of belonging. It also helps one to appreciate one's identity, values, and culture. You know, when our children were young, I remember listening to a lecture on parenting. One of the points the speaker emphasized was to create a family tradition that teaches the children our value. And we see God here is the parent, teaching the Israelite that a godly nation has its identity. Remember what your heavenly parent did for you. If you recall back in Exodus chapter 12:2, God told the Israelite that the day of the Passover celebration is their beginning. So in the calendar, Passover is the first month of the national calendar. Also, Passover is a symbol of their obedience and faith. Let's look at Exodus 12:23. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the door frame and will pass over that doorway. Celebrating Passover wasn't optional. It was a sign of faith and obedience. Skipping it was seen as breaking the covenant with God. Later on, I'll read to you in this chapter, verse 13. Passover also foreshadow a greater salvation. Let's read 1 Corinthians 5:7. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Passover wasn't just historical. It pointed forward to Jesus' sacrifice. It was part of an education for them, and celebrating it will help the Israel to understand God's ultimate deliverance. In essence, just like birthdays or national holidays, Passover was a reminder of who the Israelites were and what God had done for them. It was a teaching moment for their children. It was also a spiritual anchor, linking the past to the future. Moreover, Passover was important to the Israelites because it helps the people to feel seen, connected, and rooted in something larger than themselves. Now let's read on. Let's begin in verse 6. But some of them could not celebrate the Passover on that day because they were ceremonially unclean on account of a dead body. So they came to Moses and Aaron that same day and said to Moses, "We have become unclean because of a dead body. But why should we be kept from presenting the Lord's offering with the other Israelites at the appointed time?" Moses answered them, "Wait until I find out what the Lord commands concerning you." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, when any of you or your descendants are unclean because of a dead body or are away on a journey, they are still to celebrate the Lord's Passover, but they are to do it on the 14th day of the second month at twilight. They are to eat the lamb together with the unleavened bread with bitter herbs. They must not leave any of it till morning or break any of its bones. When they celebrate the Passover, they must follow all the regulations. But if anyone who is ceremonially clean and not on a journey fails to celebrate the Passover, they must be cut off from their people for not presenting the Lord's offering at the appointed time. They will bear the consequences of their sin. A foreigner residing among you is also to celebrate the Lord's Passover in accordance with its rules and regulations. You must have the same regulations for both the foreigner and the native born." According to Exodus 12, verses 15 to 20, the Israelites were commanded to keep the Passover, which involved the ritual slaughter of a lamb, the spreading of its blood on the doorposts, and eating unleavened bread and bitter herb, right? And in verse 13, and also in Exodus 12, 19 to 20, stated that anyone who did not observe the festival would be cut off from the community of Israel. What does that mean? This means that they would be excluded from the covenant people. What does the term covenant people mean? Well, it means that they were specially chosen and set apart by God to reflect his character, receive his blessing, and fulfill his plan to bring salvation to the world. In another word, their identity and destiny were deeply rooted in the covenant relationship with God. And verse 13 said if they don't observe the festival, even though there's a provision for them to celebrate when they were not able to, like ceremonially unclean or on a journey, that they would face spiritual or social punishment by being severed from the nation and its people and lose their privileges. Human being will tend to slack off, right? You know that, unless there's a repercussion or consequence. That's kind of sad. This idea of being cut off was a serious matter in Old Testament. highlighting the importance of observing God's commandments and maintaining the sanctity of the covenant community. But God's not rigid. We see here He's flexible too. He said that if you were exposed to a corpse or a dead body, or if you are on a journey, I let you celebrate it next month, second month, on the 14th day at twilight. So there was no excuse for them, right? Even the stranger in the house were to observe the Passover. Let me clarify, foreigner or stranger. These stranger or foreigner, they have to be circumcised before they could participate in the Passover. You can look that up in Exodus chapter 12, verse 48. Now let's move on. Verse 15. On the day the tabernacle, the tent of the covenant law, was set up, the cloud covered it. From evening till morning, the cloud above the tabernacle looked like fire. That is how it continued to be. The cloud covered it. And at night, it looked like fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Wherever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. As long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, they remained in camp. Whether the cloud stayed over the tabernacle for 2 days or a month or a year, the Israelites would remain in camp and not set out. But when it lifted, they would set out. At the Lord's command, they encamped. And at the Lord's command, they set out. They obeyed the Lord's order in accordance with His commands through Moses. Most importantly, I emphasize this verse 23. At the command of the Lord, they remained encamped. And at the command of the Lord, they set out. The Israelites' journey through the wilderness wasn't determined by maps, logic, or preference. It was shaped by the movement of the cloud. If the cloud lingered for a night or a year, they stayed. If it lifted, they packed and moved, no matter the timing. This rhythm teaches us a profound truth. Following God means surrendering our sense of control. In our modern lives, we often ask, what's next? But Numbers 9 reminds us the better question would be what? Where is God leading? Whether we are in a season of waiting or transitioning, our role is simple. Be sensitive to God's presence. Trust His timing. Obey His voice, even when we don't understand the full picture. Like the Israelites, our security isn't in the place we are, but in the one who guides us. I will end with a simple story. The sun rose slowly over the wilderness. The camp of Israel stirred, but there was no packing, no shouting, no trumpets. The clouds still hovered over the tabernacle. Young Eliab, son of one of the tribal elders, sat just outside his family's tent, watching the stillness above the sanctuary. It had been 12 days since the cloud last moved. "Why haven't we moved, Father?" he asked, his eyes scanning the endless horizon. "Don't we need to get to the promised land?" His father looked at the tabernacle, then back at his son. Because the cloud hasn't moved, he replied simply. And if God is staying, we stay. But we've been here so long. The manna is the same every day. The sand gets in everything. And I thought this journey would be more exciting. His father smiled. Eliab, this journey isn't about how fast we get there. It's about who we are following. God leads us, not just with fire and cloud, but with his love. If he says, wait, then we'll wait. That evening, as the stars fill the sky and the fire glow cover the tabernacle, Eliab lay in his tent and whispered a prayer. Lord, help me to love the waiting if you are in it. For us Christian, like Eliab, we often want progress, movement, answers. But God sometimes teaches us in the waiting. Numbers 9 reminds us obedience is not about pace, but presence. Remaining where God is, moving only when he leads. Happy Sabbath.